This is my podcast, The Bloody Vegans. You're very welcome to it. Each week, I'll be travelling ever deeper into the world of veganism, discovering along the way a multitude of viewpoints from the political and ethical to the practical. I'll be doing this through a series of conversations, each aiming to further illuminate my understanding, and hopefully yours, of all things plant-centric. And this week is no different. I'm going to be chatting with Ky Wright, the founder of Human Food. Human Food is an incredible manufacturer, producer of nutrition bars. Organic smart food, if you like, is the title that Human Food would use to describe it. And, from everything from the ingredients to the packaging to the way that the product is delivered to you, Human Food is all about sustainability and ultimately kind of building to a healthier future for all of us. The bar itself is absolutely packed with nutrition. They come in 3 flavours. It's organic, no synthetic multivitamins or additives like that are used at all. It doesn't contain any GMOs or soy, refined sugar. It's absolutely incredible. So to tell us a little bit about his journey into the world of Human Food and the founding of the business, I'm joined by Ky Wright. So without further ado, here's a conversation between me and Ky.
So the previous business that I was involved in running, I set up with a friend when we were still in school. It started off as an ice cream business and then became a frozen yogurt business. And we were running that from Brighton and kind of supplying lots of different supermarkets, and it was going well. And then kind of during that time, my eating habits changed. I stopped eating processed sugar, and I increasingly stopped eating dairy, and had already stopped eating meat. I suppose the primary drivers for that, there was actually one book in particular called The Tao of Health, Sex and Longevity, which kind of talked about the health aspect of it, especially its effect on digestion, but also there were kind of ethical questions which I'd been completely unaware of up until then. Just for example, the impact on the lifespan of a dairy cow versus a cow, kind of what their lifespan would otherwise be. And it just literally had never entered my consciousness before then. But then as soon as it kind of had, and I started kind of living differently, it became increasingly difficult for me to keep working as part of that business. And it wasn't possible because of the situation we were in to kind of radically change our products. So I actually decided to leave. And then it was shortly after leaving, 2014, that I began development on Human Food. And then there was kind of a 4 or 5 year development process before it finally launched. But that was kind of my transition.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you'd say probably it sort of started with health and then kind of worked its way through the various subjects.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of untangle it. I suppose it's just kind of it's kind of a feeling, isn't it, that you should that you should change, and I suppose it's going to be influenced by kind of various things. But I suppose with the kind of health side of things, that book I mentioned, that as well as lots of other things, I was kind of experimenting with, kind of trying out the suggestions and then just seeing how it made me feel. And once I got used to the feeling of cutting out dairy and kind of the impact that had on my digestion, just kind of feeling a lot more awake, then it wasn't there was no kind of effort required, to kind of to quit, just because I wanted to, because of how it felt.
So you mentioned it's quite a long sort of gestation process, if you like, for the business of Human Food. Can you remember there being an initial kind of seed of inspiration? Was it like looking around the current marketplace? What started it off?
So I suppose when in the process of moving over to a plant-based diet, I guess I became more aware of the potential for nutrition deficiencies. And I probably started spending a bit more time in kind of health food shops and looking at supplements and considering supplements and taking supplements. And I remember kind of one of the first times I went into Holland and Barrett and kind of looked at the shelf of supplements you might decide to take. I was just overwhelmed, by the range, and I was just thinking, how could you possibly know which one of these to take? And you look on the back, and it says they're all good for you. So it's like, should I take every single pill in here? And it just felt really unscientific and just kind of a bit random. So I thought it made much more sense just to have a single product that contained everything you needed. And then as soon as I started kind of looking into that more, what I discovered was that the vast majority, I don't know the exact percentage, but probably 99% of supplements and fortified foods on the market contain synthetic nutrients rather than this natural equivalents which you'd get from food. And it was a long process of discovery, but I eventually came to learn that synthetic versus natural nutrients, they're very, very different things in terms of bioavailability, but also in terms of how they're processed and used by the body. So what kind of human food was aiming to do was to make it so easy to get a nutritionally complete plant-based diet from whole food nutrients that particular barrier to people going plant-based was kind of reduced as much as possible. Because it's something that I hear all the time, someone saying, I really want to go plant-based for this health reason or this ethical reason, but it's too complicated. I'm worried about nutrition deficiencies, all of that stuff. So, and for me personally, it took me years and huge amounts of effort to get to a point where I felt that I understood everything well enough to feel comfortable that I was getting a nutritionally complete diet. And I know that not everybody has the kind of the time, the ability to do that. So I just wanted to kind of combine all of that learning into a product just so that someone could, just straight away from scratch be getting the best possible diet.
I think you certainly have achieved it. I must say that the bars are, nutritionally, you read the back and you think this is just an absolute feast of incredible ingredients. That taste great and are and in that convenient format. And I'll sort of circle back to a point you made there, because I think I've definitely felt exactly that experience that you described, standing in a health food shop, looking at all of the supplements, the protein powders, the bars, sometimes looking for something that's good for me, and being absolutely bewildered by the marketing of it.
There's so many misleading claims and so many sources of misleading information, many of which from very cynically put there by people with agendas to make it confusing. That it really requires a lot of effort and in the case of human food, kind of expert opinions and advice and research. Just to get to something that's kind of reasonable. And what we've done with our development, so kind of the nutritional profile, but also the inclusion of functional ingredients and the levels at which they're included, is every single decision is based on clinical research. So I suppose lots of the concepts come from kind of more ancient health systems. So the bars and the whole kind of principle is in keeping with Ayurvedic and Taoist systems, which look at where the kind of a person's health primarily comes from their digestion, and that's kind of the source of good health or bad health. But then everything is based on modern clinical research, and we reference everything as well as doing our own research and making all of that available, just to do what we can to kind of cut through all of that kind of noise and misinformation.
That's incredible, and just adds such a level of trust, as a purchaser of one of these products. That's like you say, when you stood in that store, there is so much, and the power of marketing. I think back to it's just an example that sort of sticks with me, because I was kind of a bit surprised by it, and it was during my sort of my vegan journey, but so I didn't obviously partake in this product, but seeing like a Mars bar, which was to all intents and purposes a Mars bar, which had some sort of protein powder put in it, so it had been marketed as like a protein rich sauce. It had that written. It was like the new Mars protein bar, but it was essentially a Mars bar with a protein powder in. And so I did think, the vast majority of people of their, like you say, busyness and so on, there and social media and all these kind of other forms of, information, for want of a better word, sort of would suggest to them, eat more protein equals good. And so they think, I'll eat that Mars bar, it's better.
Completely. Like, the protein is the current buzzword, and it's kind of, protein is synonymous with health. So it's like you can just look at any food product and look at the level of protein and maybe compare that to the level of sugars in there and say, oh, if the protein's high and the sugars are low, then it's good. But it's obviously a lot more complicated than that, because you don't just need protein. You also need vitamin B12, and you need vitamin D, and you need vitamin E, and, kind of everything. But also not all protein is good. And the source of protein is really important. And there is such a thing as having too much protein as well.
Yeah, and that, I think, is a really key subject, isn't it? Because like you say, everyone sort of is associating protein equals health, but not necessarily tailoring that to their workouts, or the amount of activity they're doing, or the type of activity. So their protein requirement, if you asked anybody what is your protein requirement, I don't think many of us would know. So just talking about the difference between this synthetic nutrient profile and then the profile of something like human food, what's the kind of key difference? You mentioned bioavailability and so on.
Yeah, so this is something which has been a completely new discovery to me. So when I kind of began the development work on human food, initially I just thought, we'll use all organic ingredients, and then we'll put in some vitamins, without really ever thinking too much about what vitamins are, what minerals are. And then I discovered that the organic certifying bodies prohibit the use of synthetic vitamins and minerals, with a couple of exceptions like baby food and bread. And then straight away I was like, oh, wow, I wonder why that would be. And then I started to kind of look into that a bit more and discover more about synthetic nutrients and what they actually are, and discovered things that were really surprising, I think, to kind of probably anyone who hasn't really kind of looked at it much before. So, for example, synthetic nutrients, like say, for example, synthetic vitamin B12, it isn't actually molecularly, it's close and similar to the molecule for the natural version, but it isn't identical, and it's actually quite different in size. And in terms of bioavailability, the natural version is absorbed by the blood at 2.5 times the rate of the synthetic version, which is really significant, because if you, for example, you're vegan and you're using a meal replacement which claims to contain 100% of your B12, but that's synthetic, then actually you're going to be not getting enough. Your body won't be absorbing the amount that you need. Bioavailability is just one aspect, because these molecules actually aren't the same as the real thing. They're not processed by your body in the same way. And there's huge amounts of research, like big meta studies, which have looked at intake of synthetic nutrients over time. And there's no evidence, or at least in the studies that I'm aware of, that taking synthetic nutrients improves health, and there's actually quite a lot of evidence that it damages health over time. And there's a lot of incentive for people in the food industry to be able to use these synthetic equivalents, and for no one to really notice the difference or think there is a difference, because what you can do is you can include these synthetic vitamins in a food product, and like one of the meal replacements that's currently popular, and you can multiply the price by 10 because it has this it has this really impressive nutritional profile, and you can claim it's a health product, but what you're actually getting from that is vastly different from if you were getting those nutrients from food.
That's fascinating. So there's a lot in there I'd want to ask about. I'll start with, for most people, I think, we all know when we go on the vegan journey, like the B12 one is the one that everyone suddenly becomes aware of, when you start the journey. It's the one that everybody tells you you're going to be deficient in. First of all, you're going to have a protein deficiency, and then you're going to have a B12 deficiency. That's kind of what you're told. And I'm interested in this difference you mentioned there about it being almost a different thing, structurally. this synthetic B12. The source of B12.
If you're following a vegetarian diet, you should be able quite easily to get enough B12 through dairy, eggs. But if you're completely plant-based, it is going to be really, really difficult to get enough B12 in your diet. And every single vegan product I'm aware of that contains B12 has got synthetic B12 in. Apart from human food. And I'm not to say that there isn't another one in the world that also has a natural organic source, but I'm not aware of it. And the source in human food is organic quinoa sprout extract. That's where the B12 comes from. And what we get, a lot of feedback we get from people is just saying, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as a natural source of vegan B12. And there's lots and lots of websites that say there's no such thing as a natural source of vegan B12. And there's lots of products out there, and on their websites, they also claim that because they're selling synthetic B12. And I mean, there are sources of natural vegan B12. It's just they're much more expensive to include in a food product than using the synthetic version. The difference in price is maybe about 100 times. So that's that's the incentive for this misinformation. But what those companies are essentially doing is they're making higher profits at the expense of people's health. Like that's essentially what's going on.
That's fascinating. So yeah, because I'll be completely honest with you, the sort of the narrative that I'd heard, and even to be fair, within sort of vegan sources, was always, B12 was sourced from as a microbe that covered the earth. As we've kind of depleted the quality of our soil, etc., we don't get it readily available, and our society's too sort of over sanitized. So therefore, we don't get it. Therefore, what we were getting it from animals who either first ate the microbe or probably more latterly were injected with it, and it was therefore fed through meat, that kind of thing.
Interestingly, also, something I've read is that if you eat organic vegetables, you will be getting amounts of B12 from soil residues on the vegetables themselves. And that's kind of a way in which people following plant-based diets, forever would have got B12 into their diet. But if you buy, if your vegetables are chemically produced and kind of jet washed and wrapped in plastic and bought from a supermarket, there won't be any traces of B12 on there. So that's quite an interesting thing as well.
I guess that the challenge there, I suppose, is reliable quantity, right? Which is something that kind of a product like human food gives you.
Yeah, definitely. It's knowing for certain that you're getting absolute minimum of 100% every day. With the B12 and actually with all the nutrients in human food, the idea with it is just to kind of standardize and make more reasonable the whole process. So rather than kind of just kind of eat foods which you think are high in certain things and hope that you're getting enough each day, we just wanted to make it super, super reasonable so that you just know you have one bar that's at least 100% RI of your B12. And then for the other key nutrients, it's at least 50%. And then that just kind of through eating a normal kind of organic whole food diet, that you'll easily be getting a nutritionally complete diet.
And so the sort of interested in the kind of the target, if you like, of human food. Like, who would it be? Who's it primarily been designed for? Is it kind of like a daily product that somebody can just eat on the go as a snack? Is it kind of in part multivitamin, or would you describe it more in the kind of the health and fitness space, or does it kind of actually kind of cover all of those things?
Right from the beginning, the inception of the business idea, I knew right from the start that our principle would be that 50% of profits are reinvested in R&D. And that kind of concept, the idea for that was kind of partly inspired by Dyson Hoovers. In that everyone kind of knows that Dyson make the best Hoovers, and that's kind of what they're famous for, and the best products. And the way that they've managed to do that is they have the highest rate of reinvestment in R&D, which makes perfect sense, right? So it's like the more money you invest in R&D, the better your products can become. So right from the beginning, that was a really kind of key aspect of what we're doing. And what that's enabled us to do so far is work with the most credible research institutions to do research into human food, so that, I mean, all of the kind of the principles of human food, the whole food nutrients and the functional ingredients, it's all based in really solid theory and clinical evidence. But until you kind of test theory, you never know for certain kind of what's going to happen. And we completed the first proper clinical study with Swansea University at the end of last year, and then published 100% of the results, which you can see now on our website a few months ago. And so the things they were looking at, for example, are glucose response over time, as well as satiety over time, which is really key, because with the glucose response, what the results showed from that study was that there's no sugar spike and no crash, which is a real problem with a lot of foods, especially foods containing lots of sugar, because you kind of get into that cycle of, you eat something like a chocolate bar, you have a sugar spike, and then you immediately have a crash, and then you kind of feel exhausted and tired, and then you need to eat some more sugar to kind of get back and be operational, and then you're kind of locked into this kind of negative cycle. And then the satiety, which is perceived fullness, is obviously really important, because what the study demonstrated is that if you eat a human food bar, that for at least 2 hours you're not hungry. So and it's a really nice kind of gentle curve that kind of your satiety kind of goes up, and then it just stays high all the way past the 2 hour mark. And then also what they were looking at is reaction response using the Stroop test, which again had really, really positive results, which we'd expected from the composition of the products. But again, until you kind of test it, you don't know for certain. And for example, one of the results from that was that the yellow bars, which contain 500 milligrams of turmeric, which had the most significant results, although all three bars had really good positive results. But the yellow bar was shown to reduce reaction time by over 10%.
Wow.
Yeah, which is
That's
more
incredible.
Powerful than a lot of kind of pharmaceutical drugs out there, and with zero side effects, and actually with lots of proven long-term health benefits.
It's my favourite one as well.
Oh, well, then that's lucky. Yeah.
So in terms of and I love that model of how much you're putting back into research. What's kind of on the horizon for you? Where do you see the kind of the future, maybe the tweaking of the existing products, the line up into the future? What does it look like?
Sure. Well, the kind of the function of the research that we're doing, and we're currently in the planning stages of 2 new pieces of research with different academic institutions, and the idea is to constantly be doing more research and bigger studies which provide better information. And the purpose of that information is partly to inform future product development, but also just to provide information which we make freely available, just so that the people using our products have access, to the most information possible, so that they can make intelligent decisions for themselves.
That's awesome. So I've got a bit of a question around this kind of idea of this amount of research compared to like some of the products out on the market. Does this make, and I imagine the answer is yes, does this make things just infinitely more difficult for a company like Human Food, just because of the time it's going to take to make sure that product is of such a great quality?
There's no other product that I'm aware of in the world that's done anything near the level of research that we've already done. And as time goes on, that distance is getting bigger and bigger. And there's several reasons behind that. One of them is just the time involved. So in order to begin that first study that we did with Swansea University, there's about 3 years in the planning. There's so many stages to go through. There's kind of ethical bodies. There's just huge amounts of work. It's also extremely expensive. But then the other reason why I would imagine that other companies in this space haven't done the research is because if they were to do the research, it would come back with negative results. And there are actually cases of big brands, which I don't know, maybe I probably shouldn't mention them. I don't know how public the information is, but beginning research, getting really bad results early on, and then stopping it because they don't. The last thing they want is like full studies showing that their products aren't good for you, or don't do what their clever marketing implies they do, but actually there's no evidence for.
Yeah, I'd imagine, and I suppose the world we're in, sadly, if the benchmark is low for them to be able to claim something as a health food, then the incentive is also not there for them to persevere with tweaking and making that product right, like you guys at Human Food have done.
Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't really fit with the modern kind of business model of making as much money as quickly as possible.
No, absolutely. Have you guys? I mean, I know you guys sell direct and you do subscription, which is an awesome value way to make sure that you've got a healthy supply of Human Food bars available to you. I'm certainly of the mind that that's the best way to go.
Yeah, it's one of the perks of working here is that you have a ready source of Human Food bars, but then also of the kind of new development products, which we're always working on.
Is the intention, I think, eventually to move into, or even if indeed have you begun to make links in the kind of the big chains, the high street stores, maybe? Is that a plan for you, or is the kind of proximity to your customer been something that you want to maintain for the time being?
Sure. Our kind of plan is just not to think about that for the time being, and maybe down the road we'll be approached, but the kind of reasoning for that is so our product is, as far as I'm aware, and I've heard this from several people kind of in the industry, our bars are the most expensive to manufacture, in terms of the cost of ingredients, food product that exists anywhere in the world by a really large margin. And the kind of reason for that is the costing was never really done until, the recipe was finalized, because all I was trying to do was just kind of, what we were trying to do was make the thing as good as you possibly can make it. And then the reasoning being that we then charge a price that works, so that we can run a business, but that is still as low as possible to make it as available as possible. And we were just working on the assumption that there'd be enough people out there that would appreciate that. And, we may never be as big as Coca-Cola or as we may never be available in every single shop. But as long as we can find enough people out there that see the value in what we're doing and are willing to pay a bit more because it's organic and it's whole food nutrients as opposed to synthetic, then because of the nature of the internet and the subscription model, then it means that we can exist and we can supply those people with our products.
That's awesome, and I'm so pleased to hear that that's the kind of the primary driver for you, is maintaining the incredible quality, because that's certainly why I would go to Human Food personally. There just isn't anything like it on the market. Just thinking about something that I this is a personal one. I just really absolutely love the branding of Human Food. Like, it's the actual branding of the logo, the stickers, the t-shirts. There's some. It just looks incredibly cool as well. What sort of was that? Was that your creative force? Did you bring someone in for that? How did you come up with it? And what's the kind of meaning behind some of it?
Sure. I mean, everything. I really believe in group intelligence, and kind of that a group of people thinking together can come up with better, more intelligent solutions than any individual. So everything we do here is kind of a group effort. But the kind of, when it comes to kind of the styling and the branding, especially with the new products, which are going to be coming out next week, which I think have got vastly improved packaging and design and everything. Science fiction has been a major influence, and the designer we work with, he kind of shares my personal interest in science fiction, so it's quite easy for us to understand what each other's thinking and to kind of we have kind of a shared appreciation for the aesthetic, and I think it's it kind of, I think it suits what we're doing, just because what we're trying to show is that there is another more reasonable way of doing things, and we would like to believe that that's the direction that the world's moving in. I mean, it's often the case that generations will look back 50 years and just be shocked and outraged at what previous generations thought was normal and acceptable and okay. I think one day that'll include the treatment of animals, and farm animals, and so what we're doing is we're just kind of assuming that that's the end place, and we're producing things and behaving in a way that, and in terms of style, in terms of design, in terms of transparency of information, we're just operating from that future place.
That's very cool. Very cool. I love it, and I love the fact that you've got that science fiction element in the branding, but the sort of the yin yangs in there as well, and the kind of the element of almost the roots, the inception of where the business came from, and your idea.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot, several years, like trying to think of a way of kind of stylizing the human food logo to incorporate elements that kind of symbolized humanness. So I kind of I considered using eyes or hands or these other kind of symbols which mean humanness. But after huge amounts of consideration, what I actually thought symbolized to me what symbolizes humanness. I think those symbols, the CND logo, which is also kind of understood to be a peace symbol, and the yin yang, which symbolizes balance. But which also references the kind of origin of a lot of the principles which have gone into the development of human food, as in the kind of ancient Chinese health system. For me, those symbols kind of represent the best of humanness, kind of what we are at our best.
Very, very cool. Yeah, absolutely love it. It's looks fantastic, and the meaning behind it's great too. Just finally, I suppose it would be good to just get into those new products. I know you've sort of teased that there's some new products on the way, and they're quite imminent. So.
Yeah. I mean, I can't give too much away, just because we're going to be releasing all of that information from next week. So it's a little bit under wraps. But the new we're upgrading the current 3 bars, but we're also introducing 2 new bars, and that's just, I think, the more options we can give people, then the easier it'll be to incorporate human food into their lives and for people to get the benefits from it. So that's so giving a broader range of tastes and also of functionality. So all of the new bars, compared to the existing bars, they've all got improved nutritionals, including higher protein, but then also more vitamin C, more copper, more manganese. And then also they've got improved taste, texture, but we've not made any compromises on the packaging. So all the packaging is still 100% compostable. We, as far as we're aware, we already think that we're kind of quite separated from everything else that's currently available. We're assuming that the people out there that might be potentially buying our product are super informed, super aware, super knowledgeable. We're kind of approaching this from an opposite perspective to the big food corporations, which are assuming that everyone's kind of dumb and that they can be easily tricked, and that in order to maximize their profits, that you can just keep tricking people and you can keep tricking them forever. What we're doing is assuming that people can appreciate the difference and kind of and what's good for them. And even though there's still currently nothing that's even close to what we're doing, we're just constantly improving what we're doing to just increase that distance and just to kind of, I suppose, set a higher benchmark so that when other products do come out there, which I suppose is inevitable, which are also, you know, containing whole food nutrients and which are kind of trying to do what we're doing, that if they are going to kind of try and copy it, that they're going to have to set their standards really high as well to be relevant.
And ultimately everybody wins with that, right? You know, like that's the beauty of it as a sort of consumer of the products is, you know, if a company's out there setting the benchmark and blazing a trail like you guys are, if people want to compete with that, they've got to join that level, and that's can only be good for the whole marketplace and hopefully people's health generally.
I think so. I think if you come to expect that, you know, the company you buy your food from should make all of their research transparent and do research and provide, you know, lots of information so that you can understand what this food is doing to your body. If that's kind of expected and other companies have to do that as well, then that's only going to lead to a more kind of rational, reasonable approach to food.
I love this whole idea of it's sort of starting at the end, you know, starting at where are we going to end up? Where could or should society kind of get to, and then building a product but backwards from it, almost like sort of saying that's the target rather than where are we now and what's the current system like. But I can imagine, you know, as somebody who's put themselves sort of into that situation, there's real hard yards there. You know, everything's probably way more challenging than the current system, but so much more rewarding at the end though, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose, yeah, if you're just trying to make money fast, the easiest thing to do is to look for profit products that already exist, which, you know, have good profit margin, and then make something similar, maybe with better branding or maybe with, you know, like one extra USP or something, because, you know, there's an established market there. It's easy to find those customers and sell to them, but you're not really changing anything. It's just, you know, it's just more of the same. Whereas if you do something, I mean, like you were saying, you didn't know that there was really a fundamental difference between whole food nutrients and synthetic nutrients, and I didn't know that either, you know, until I embarked upon the development of human food. So since that's kind of the main difference between our product and other things that are out there, it is difficult initially, because before you can even explain why your thing's different, you first have to explain the whole concept of nutrients and why there's a difference between natural and synthetic. And so it's a lot of work, and it's not kind of a way to make money fast or anything like that. But what we just need to be able to do is kind of get a foothold, is find enough people who can appreciate the difference and believe that kind of sense is going to spread, and that eventually there'll be more people who understand the difference.
I'm sure there will, and I think, you know, there is a bit of a, you know, without sounding, you know, trying to sound too hokey, I do think there's and I'm optimistic about this, but there's a bit of an awakening generally on a number of subjects that's beginning, at least if we're not in the throes of it. And I think nutrition and diet and hopefully our treatment of animals and each other are all part of that, you know.
Completely. And I think the way people treat their bodies is directly linked to how they treat, you know, animals and how they treat the world in general. I think an increased awareness of the impact of your choices, you know, whether that's impacting your own health or the health of others or the well-being of other beings. I think it's all inextricably linked, and I don't think you can really separate it. And I think the kind of compartmentalization that goes on by people and this was myself, you know, a few years ago. I mean, it's we're all humans and we all think similarly, and everyone's on their own journey and kind of at different stages in it. But I think the compartmentalization that enables people to kind of you know, care deeply for their dog or their cat, but care nothing you know, for the cow that's trapped in a stainless steel box for its whole life, is similar to the way in which people are able to care about their children and their friends and their families, but care nothing about, or seemingly care very little about, homeless people on the street or people in poorer countries who happen, you know, to be unfortunate with their government or you know, and so supposedly the warranting of having bombs dropped on them by Western governments. I think it's all connected, and that the solution, if we are, I believe we are going to move to a more reasonable way of operating as a species, and I think the solution to all of those things kind of is combined in our diets and our health, and as well as kind of what we do in broader spheres.
Couldn't agree more, Kai. I think you've worded that beautifully and very articulately indeed. And yeah, I'm totally with you on that sentiment. Just to wrap up, then, so if we were to encourage some folks to take a look at the website and check out that research, and hopefully take the step to a subscription in human food, and I would absolutely endorse that. I'd encourage people to give that a go. The product is incredible, both nutritionally and I think the taste too. As I said to you just before we started recording, it's become a pretty standard daily part of my nutrition, and certainly when I'm out doing stuff. I was out on a fairly long bike ride this morning, and it was a welcome kind of midway bit of a refuel. So yeah, really appreciate it. Where would folks go to find out more?
Yeah, so just if you Google human food, our website should come up top, or go to humanfood.bio, which is bio. And yeah, we've published all the university trial results there. There's huge amounts of information, and we reference everything we ever say about nutrition, so you can also kind of go back to the source studies and kind of see where all of that's coming from. So
amazing work, Kai, and wish you all the best of luck with human food. I think it's absolutely a company built with the right intentions at its heart.
Brilliant, thank you, and yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. And yeah, we'll send you some of the new bars.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cool.